Hi, I'm Derek Calhoun. This is my wife, Susan Calhoun. Susan and I met when we were actually in middle school, graduated from high school together, got married after college, had our first child, daughter. 3 years later, we had a son. Our daughter it seemed like things came easy for her. School was easy, making friends was easy. Our son, not so easy. He had to work harder for things. He was a really neat, talented young man. Chris was his name. He always pulled for the underdog, but struggled with self-esteem. And eventually he found his way to the medicine cabinet. And we'd have conversations. We prayed and used every resource that we knew to get to the core of what it is that was really, really bothering him. Yet the addiction seemed to be building. We had one particular morning where we got the call from the high school that Chris was not responding. And I still remember that morning, both of us driving to the hospital and not knowing what we would find. And he had survived. And we thought that was the bottom. Maybe things would turn from there. But unfortunately, they didn't. His use continued. He had a good friend that also died of a drug overdose, and it really affected him emotionally. And we thought, well, that's it. That's the bottom. He'll turn. But he didn't turn. We went through various rehabs. One was a year-long residential program. All the while praying, fasting, doing all the things that a Christian family and a parent would do, hoping for an outcome and having a vision of what we thought that outcome should be. Ultimately, we got the phone call that no parent wants to hear. 5 o'clock in the morning, his girlfriend was on the phone. I couldn't really even understand what she was saying. She was so hysterical until I made out the words that he's dead. And then I had to tell my wife, who was still in bed with me, that what I just heard. It was a lot to take in. As a parent, you felt like you failed, like it's my job to protect, and I couldn't protect you. A few days later, obviously there was a funeral, and I stood there with my family. I still tell people that it's almost like a dream sequence in a movie, where everything's kind of foggy. That's exactly how it felt for me. I couldn't see people. I'm told that there were several hundred, maybe a couple thousand people there. I didn't see any faces. I was so completely torn up inside. But I remember being on the front row of the church and my son in the casket in front of us. We were all sitting there. And there was a certain song that got played when we were there. It was a Hillsong United song called Hold Me Now. And the song talked about no more sorrow or pain. And at that moment, I looked over and saw my daughter, Lauren, and she stood up and she raised her hands in the air and she started worshiping Christ. And it was at that moment that we both knew that she wasn't just serving God because we serve God. She was serving God because it was her God. And so one by one, the front row, we stood up and we raised our hands and we started worshiping God.
About 2 weeks before Chris passed away, I had already signed up with the Atlanta Dream Center to be involved with their anti-sex trafficking outreach. So I started working with women and talking with women, and I just realized that whenever I would talk about Chris or tell our story, a wall came down. It's like they could suddenly relate to me. I could relate to them. It was just having that in common, the addiction. I would have never had that had it not been for the tragedy of Chris passing. As I continued to work with the women, I realized that they didn't have skills. They didn't have job skills. And I was trying to find something where they might be trained. And so I had thought of a coffee shop, and if they could be trained baristas, this was about 14 years ago, then that meant they could go out to any coffee shop in the Atlanta area and get a job. And it meant a lot to an owner of a coffee shop to have a pre-trained barista. So in working with the women, it brought a lot of joy. It also brought a lot of healing that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting to give out to them, but they also gave back to me, and seeing them just progress in their recovery and be able to walk with them through that just brought a lot of joy and a lot of peace. Well, Pastor Paul called us and said, well, what do you want to name the coffee shop? And I said, I always thought it would be Atlanta Dream Center Coffee Shop. But Derek had actually come up with the name. He said, oh, I have a name, and it was Criss Cross Coffee. So if you write Chris's name out, this real name is Christopher with the T. You've got Chris with the T being the cross, then shows Chris being before the cross. That's the meaning of crisscross in today's terms is Christ cross.
So when I look back now at the coffee shop and all the things that have happened at Atlanta Dream Center Church, and I kind of take myself back to where we were when our son passed, and it really felt like everything had burned up around me, all the things that I had planned. But then it took a few years, but at a certain point, God started pointing out to me that everybody in my life today that's important to me that I spend time with, other than immediate family, all happened as a direct result of the loss of our son. We wouldn't have been involved in ministry. There would have been no coffee shop. We wouldn't have gone to Atlanta Dream Center Church. We wouldn't be sitting in front of this camera today telling our story. And it really let me know, it made that scripture come to life in Isaiah, that he would give us beauty for our ashes. That's our beauty. So when Pastor Paul said he wanted a coffee shop at the Dream Center, and Susan had this dream of doing a coffee shop, we instantly knew, hey, this is it. We knew that God put on our heart to build a coffee shop, and he trusted us. The church supported us 100%. Back to that part of God, of the church allowing us to live out our God dream.
It's really true. I mean, I really just couldn't believe that they would just allow us to come in and, they just...
We'd never done it. We didn't know anything about coffee.
Nothing.
So it's like, okay, we're going to build a coffee shop in your church, and he just let us do it. Yeah. One of the very first things that Susan and I did after we got the call that Chris had passed away is we stood together and we held hands and we prayed, God, don't waste our pain. And I can tell you, he's been faithful. The pain's been there. But he hasn't wasted that pain. He's used it.